Ariam, everyone. My name is Sapna. I'm a Setukari based in the Boston area. Gratitude to Vivekji and the entire Prithvi Seva team for having us join today. I'm joined by a friend and Chinmaya Yuva Kendra that also is from Boston, Amalina. Amalina recently relocated to DC after finishing her college, where she continues to invest in the Chinmaya Mission community, both as a chick participating in different classes, but also recently starting to teach Balvihar, third and fourth grade. Amalina's personal interests are very aligned close to what we're doing today. She herself invests and follows a plant-based diet, and she loves to cook for her friends and family. I can vouch that she is a fantastic cook, so we're lucky to get to learn something from her directly today. She'll be teaching us a recipe that deals with seasonal cooking. And maybe I'll turn it over to Amalina just to share a little bit about what inspired you to come up with this recipe and have us to do this interactive session today.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sapna. And I'm really grateful to be with you all. I wanted to use something like incorporate local produce and produce that is grown seasonally, which I talked a little bit about in like the article that I wrote for this current workshop. But basically, the center of this recipe is zucchini, or like you can trade it out for squash. But essentially, I wanted to have like a creative way to use zucchini. Typically, at this time of the year, I think many of us, if we grow our own vegetables or just in the grocery store, we can have an abundance of zucchini and squash, and sometimes we don't know what to do with it. So I wanted to do something creative with it, and basically, the idea is to make either muffins or zucchini bread, depending on what trays that you have available with you. And it ends up being something similar to a banana type bread. So like sweet in flavor, but using an ingredient that we may not usually use.
Great. And so I'm just scanning the room and I'm seeing a few people that are joining us here from the kitchen and a few that are watching along, which is totally fine as well. As we go through this recipe, Amelina and I will be sharing some of our own experiences with trying to cook in a very sustainable way at home, the way that we've either set up our kitchen or our lifestyle to do that. And this will be interactive. So whether you're cooking along with us or following along in the chat, we're happy to also hear what you all are doing to be more sustainable in your lifestyle. So maybe Amelina, just to get things started, maybe you'll share a little bit of what we should start doing in the kitchen, and then we'll go into some more dialogue.
Yeah, sounds perfect. So if anyone's joining us, we're going to start by preheating our oven to 350 degrees. Either if you're making bread or muffins, that will be the temperature we use. And then if you're making bread, we'll basically be keeping it in for longer. If you're making muffins, it will be just 15, 20 minutes cooking. So I think Sapna will have a kitchen camera where you can follow along, more like bird's eye view to see exactly what she's doing. But I will be doing something similarly, just with my bowl right here. But yes, preheating your oven to 350. Okay. Once that is done, you're going to start by grating your zucchini. I think the best way to do it is to take one large metal bowl. Basically, everything can be done in this metal bowl, which is great for doing dishes, not wasting too much water, and also just keeping everything together. The way I like to do it is putting like a cheesecloth or a cloth down on in the bowl, and then grating on top of that. Or you can do what Sapna's doing, which you can just go grate in the bowl itself, and then use a cheesecloth or a cloth to drain it out after. So I have it already done kind of right here. That's what you want it to look like after. So just grating, yes, exactly. Grating one zucchini into that pot. And then as Sapna said, if throughout it anyone has any questions or has specific questions about sustainability or eating local produce, things like that, please feel free to drop it in the chat and we can definitely talk about it.
Actually, Amelina, while I'm doing this, I do have a question on what you typically do when there are veggies that some people peel and, maybe it's not necessary to peel. What's your view on just using the peels directly, or do you have other tips of ways to reduce that waste?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the zucchini, no need to peel. like you can definitely grate the whole thing, just wash it before. And then you ask how big should our zucchini be? Just like a medium-sized zucchini is probably fine. I don't know. I'm very liberal with my recipes. It may turn out a little different in texture for each of us, but that's life. We'll all live with that. With peeling, I typically don't, I don't know, peel vegetables that don't have to be peeled. Obviously I will like not use the peel of a potato or onions. Um, but I think for that, I haven't yet done this because I just moved into my apartment, but at some point I definitely want to do this. A lot of vegetable scraps can be stored in a plastic or in a container and kept in the freezer, so like they don't smell or anything, and can actually be used to make vegetable broth. That is like very tasty. It's like much tastier than the vegetable broth that we get from the grocery store. But basically, like any sort of scraps that you would normally throw away, especially those scraps of like onion, the tops of garlic, the nubs of like the ends of carrots, zucchini, even like things like that. If you keep it, and once your container gets pretty full, put it in a large quart container on the stove and just boil water and keep it going for a couple hours. After that, your like once it's boiling, so you're not like all the dirt and like everything is bacteria free, the broth that you have left over will be really really rich because it's from all those vegetable scraps. And once you drain those vegetable scraps, that can be used for anything that you would use vegetable broth for. And then I've also
Great.
heard of
That's a
people
great tip.
pickling. Yeah, I've also heard of people like pickling watermelon rinds and things like that for trying. I haven't yet tried it, but I think it would be great. Yeah, exactly. Vegetable broth soup, I think
I
would be really good.
I've done that with radish stems actually, and radish. So using like the entire portion of the radish, we actually were growing radishes in our garden plot this summer, and so of course we could eat the radish, and then the stems you can pickle. The leaves also could be used for salads and sautéing. So trying to
Nice.
use as
I've
much
always
of it as possible.
nice. I've always wondered what to do with the radish leaves because I feel like I have so much and I don't know how to use it.
All right, so I've got my zucchini all grated. Do I just drain out the water?
Exactly. Yeah. So squeeze it out and then you can just discard the water. It doesn't have to be completely dry. It's kind of hard to get to that point. It is going to be our like much of our like binder component in this recipe, but it shouldn't be soaking. Radish leaves and paratas. Oh, that sounds good.
Ooh, that
Okay.
sounds great.
So after that, we're going to combine some of our wet ingredients. Actually, while we do this, if anyone is using an egg replacement, so like a vegan version of an egg, if you have chia seeds or flax seeds, this would be the point where you would make the vegan egg. So what I usually use is 1 tablespoon of chia seeds and 3 tablespoons of water that I let sit, and that turns into a sort of like egg-like consistency. You can also use ground flax seeds, or if you have neither of those with you, a regular egg works fine. But basically, yes, we're just going to make this little plant-based egg. And also, in other recipes, I have used a banana or applesauce or even pumpkin puree for this like egg replacement. It depends on what kind of recipe you're making. But if you wanted to make this more fall themed, I'm sure pumpkin would be great.
I'm trying to be extra mindful today when taking water from the sink because we are trying not to waste.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, perfect. So we're just going to let that sit while we do our dry ingredients. Let me pull up my recipe. Okay, so we want, for dry ingredients, we want all-purpose flour or any other plain flour that you have. We're going to add 1.5 cups of flour to our bowl of zucchini. So 1.5 cups.
So I have a question as I'm pulling out this flour that's in plastic. Does anyone have any suggestions on where to get less packaged pantry staples just anything that you've explored. One thing that I try to do is buy things in bulk so that I don't have to use as much packaging. But just curious if there are other ways that you've tried to reduce your waste with things like flour, lentils, etc.
Think if you have bulk food stores in the area, that is also works well. Then you can go in with your own containers and use them. And then also, if you're in like the Pennsylvania DMV area, I don't know how far south it goes, but there's a company called The Rounds, which will deliver packet like unpackaged, but like pantry staples to your home in reusable containers. And then every week you kind of just keep the old containers on the doorstep, and then they take it from you and then replace it, depending on how often you want.
That's an awesome tip. And yeah, I see some people writing that they try to get flour in paper packages or use bulk food sections, which is great.
Okay, so it's 1.5 cups of flour. Then you want to add half a teaspoon each of baking powder and baking soda. And while you're at it, also half a teaspoon of salt.
Have we already added our egg?
No, not yet. The egg is still sitting, waiting to be turn into egg-like consistency.
And the dry
I'm
ingredients
gonna
are
just do.
separate, right? We're not adding it to the zucchini.
I think it depends on what you want. I just like to do everything in one bowl, just so it like I don't have to do more dishes after. Um, and then I kind of just mix in the dry ingredients at the top, so there's not clumps of baking powder and baking soda. What is the proportion of almond flour in the recipe? That is a good question. I have not done this with almond flour, but if you have a good one, I'm sure you could try doing a 1-to-1 ratio, but I am not entirely sure, unfortunately. Okay, so we've got baking powder, baking soda, salt. Okay, then you're gonna do 1 cup of sugar. The recipe calls for brown sugar, but whatever sugar you like, granulated sugar you have on hand should work fine.
I'm just eyeballing the sugar here, probably doing a little less than your recipe.
It should be fine. Okay, perfect. Once the sugar is in, this is where I would also add spices. The recipe calls for cinnamon. I also like to add cardamom, so some lychee, or nutmeg if you have it, any sort of like pumpkin pie spice. I just also eyeball this.
Yeah, and just to confirm, Amelina, it's half teaspoon of baking soda and baking powder, right?
Yes. Okay, perfect. Okay, great. Once the dry ingredients are all in there, we can start adding our wet ingredients, which are essentially this egg-like mixture. Then we will add 1/3 of a cup of non-dairy milk, if you have it. Almond, oat, coconut, anything works fine. I will say coconut will probably give the most flavor. So if it depends on if you like the coconut flavor or not. I like to use oat because it's just what I have on hand, and it's usually the most neutral in flavor. But it's 1/3 of a cup of milk, and then the egg can also go in there. And then our final wet ingredient is about 1/4 of a cup of oil. You can do any sort of neutral oil. You can also do applesauce or, like I said, pureed pumpkin instead. Plenty of options there, but it's 1/4 of a cup. And then here I'm just mixing it all together, trying to get the zucchini on the bottom incorporated. Our textures might look a little different depending on how big your zucchini was. So if it's looking a little dry to you after you do a lot of mixing, maybe add a little bit more milk. It shouldn't be necessarily batter-like, but you also don't want it to be too runny or too dry. And then there's also an option here to add any sort of chopped nuts if you'd like, or chocolate chips. I've cut a bunch of like non-dairy chocolate right here next to me, which I like to add, but chopped
Emelina,
walnuts. Yes, sorry.
if people are doing applesauce as the egg substitute, about how much should they be putting in?
That is a good question. I would add like 1/4 of a cup of applesauce.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Yes. Am I worried about my calcium intake? I am not. I mean, I think it depends on, your personal situation. I've been vegan for essentially 7 years now, and I have not had a problem with calcium. But I also am very like I pay close attention to how many leafy greens and things like that I'm eating, because you can certainly get calcium from other sources like greens, like lentils, like beans that are already mostly in our Indian diet. But just making sure that you're getting a variety of those. Okay, so chia, sesame, molasses are great sources of calcium. Oh, I didn't know molasses had calcium. That's so fun. Okay, so my batter looks kind of like this, a little sticky, but that should be what you are aiming for. So at this point, I am going to get my muffin tray, but like I said earlier, you can also use a bread pan. You'll just keep it in the oven a little longer than the rest of us. And I'm also adding my chocolate chips.
Cool. And I've got these silicone muffin tins, which are helpful because they're reusable. I also use them to freeze masala sometimes. If I make batch of masala, I'll put them in here, throw it in the freezer, and then I'll have these little cubes that can help make meals with different veggies really quickly.
That's awesome. While we're doing this, Sapna, do you want to talk a little bit about how you use, like how you source local produce?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So for the past few years, I've been supporting something called a CSA, which stands for Community Supported Agriculture. These are essentially networks that work with local farms to provide produce that comes direct from the farm. You pay the farmers directly for it, and brings that local produce straight to you. So, for example, I work with a farm that's just outside the Boston area. The premise of a community supported agriculture is that you pay the farmers before they actually start laying down the crop for the season, and it's a way to ensure that regardless of how things turn out that season, they still are able to earn a living, and everything that they produce, then they distribute among the people that are in the farm share. So every other week, we pick up a box from a local pickup distribution site. and it has about 10 to 15 pounds of fresh veggies that were grown at the farm. It's always whatever is fresh and in season, usually picked that morning, which is pretty amazing. And really, I feel like I can taste the difference and feel the difference in how, I feel health wise when we're able to eat with that, primarily that. Um, I think the other benefit is just that it takes out, it kind of simplifies the thinking that goes into what to eat, because it kind of just gives you a box of things that you then feel like you want to, of course, use and not waste. And as someone that likes to cook, I also enjoy that challenge of, being able to try different things. And so there are different arrangements in terms of how the farm shares are. You can get one that's meant for just one person at home if you're living it on your own, and then also more frequent deliveries for families. The other thing that we recently started doing is a similar local arrangement for different dairy products that we have. So, for example, we now get these milk bottles actually delivered, very much like when you think about how a milk bottles used to be delivered in glass. It comes, in these bottles. And the great thing is that the farm actually takes back, the dairy actually takes back the milk bottles. They, of course, sanitize them and then reuse them. So we're trying to also get out of the cycle of the plastic waste because we do drink milk. Between that and then making yogurt just at home, we've been able to really cut down on our sort of waste associated with dairy products.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to throw these in the oven. So like I said earlier, it's 350 degrees. If you're making muffins, it should be about 15 to 20 minutes. If you're making bread, it'll be about 45 to 55 minutes. So that'll be after we end our workshop, but just keep an eye on that.
Great. So mine are in.
Perfect.
So a few other things that I try to do in our kitchen at home. One is that I actually don't keep out paper towels anywhere in the kitchen. I feel like just not even having them in reach makes it easy to not use them. Instead, I've invested in a ton of these just reusable towels, both ones that are used for while cooking or cleaning. Also, similarly, ones that we use when we're eating, like cloth napkins as well. I think we've significantly lowered how much paper towel, rolls we use. I think in the 4 years we were in our previous home, we went through one paper towel roll. And all of it was thanks to having these that we could then throw in the wash and then just reuse. And then another thing I thought to share, so in Cambridge, we're really lucky that we actually have city compost. So they give each one of us residents here a bin like this so that we can dispose of our own food scraps, like this zucchini nib that I will put in here. And they pick it up from us, just like trash and recycling is picked up once a week. But if that's not available in your city, there are several programs that actually allow you to explore composting and still do the pickups for you on a weekly or biweekly basis as needed, which is also a great option to reduce a lot of the waste. In fact, I feel when we compost, actually there's almost no or very little waste that ends up in the trash can. It's very rare that we have to take out the trash, even if this compost is something that we take out every couple of days. Emelina, what's the compost situation like in DC?
That's a good question. So I'm in Capitol Hill, so I'm sure it depends based off of where you are. But I know one of my friends will collect compost at her home, and then at Eastern Market, which is near Capitol Hill, she'll go and drop it off, and she can do that for free. So she doesn't even have to pay for someone else to come pick it up for her. I'm sure that there are other places like that in DC. I'm just not totally sure.
Cool. And I'm curious if anyone else on the line, what you all do about food scraps in particularly. Have you explored compost? If you're in a space where you can actually have a compost setup of your own, have you tried that and what's your experience been like? So I'm seeing that some stores actually collect food scraps for composting, like Mom's Organic. People put it directly in their garden, compost drop-offs, and compost bins at home. Another way I think about actually reducing waste is ensuring that none of my food actually goes bad before we consume it. So just like people meal prep on Sundays, I also try to use Sunday as the day to take stock of the fridge and make sure anything that has been neglected, especially because we have a farm share, it's sometimes there's things that we didn't pick ourselves, so it might not be our first choice of something that we might use. But that's the day I also look and ensure that before anything has gone bad, to make sure I make use of it.
Yeah, having like creative ways to use my leftovers is some like my favorite activity. I very recently we threw a housewarming party, and so we had a jar of salsa that we had too much of, and it was sitting in our fridge. And so I decided to use the salsa as the base for my vegetable korma, and it turned out incredible. Like
Oh,
it's a
cool.
kind of silly if you think about it, but it's the similar ingredients that you use for the base, like tomato, onion, garlic. Basically, the only difference is that there was a jalapeno in the salsa that wouldn't normally go in vegetable korma, but it ended up working out great. And then I used cashew cream as my plant based alternative. And my roommates can attest that they could not tell that it was salsa.
That's awesome. That sounds great. Something I just learned and started doing recently for herb greens like cilantro is actually putting it in the fridge in a jar of water. And it's actually allowed the cilantro leaves to stay fresh a lot longer. This is a week and a half old now. And I know other people, another method I've heard is that you can keep it to dry. But since I try not to use paper towels, I've just found this to be really useful. And then I try to use the stalks too in any kind of curry base that I do.
Sapna, is there a way that you try to reduce your plastic waste when you like grocery shop?
Yeah, so I have a whole collection of different size bags that I always use when we go to the grocery store, including those mesh bags. I don't have one right here, top, right in my hand, but the mesh ones that you can use for produce. Oftentimes, I feel I'm going to come home and wash things anyway, so typically I just put like if I have a head of lettuce, I'll just put it straight in the basket. I don't know if that sounds gross to some people, but I mean, I come home and I wash it anyway, so I feel it doesn't really make a big difference. Then for things that where there are maybe smaller pieces, like say beans or something like that, I would bring one of those small reusable mesh bags and fill that. Those have almost no weight, so it doesn't really add, anything to like from a cost perspective when checking out. If they are heavy, actually, oftentimes they have the weight on there so that it can be paired beforehand. But those are an easy way to make sure everything kind of stays organized and gets home. And again, it's something you can just throw into the laundry whenever you do your next load. What about you, Amelina? How do you try to reduce plastic waste when you shop for food?
Yeah, I was gonna say something very similar. My family was never a produce bag type family, so I was really raised just putting tomatoes, things straight into the basket. And then yes, of course, I wash everything when I get home. And I think also like finding my local bulk food store, I think would be very helpful. I think at this point, it tends to be slightly more expensive than just the regular grocery store, unfortunately. But at some point, I definitely want to bring jars there and refill. And I know like a lot, even just regular grocery stores will have refill options. I know, for example, at Whole Foods, they'll have refill options for things like kombucha or other things like that, which I think is helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Juiji shared that her local farmer actually subtracts the weight of the mesh bags, which is really awesome to support for us all to use less plastic when the businesses actually support that too.
And then Sapna, do you have a way to find out which produce is in season or local?
Yeah, so there is a website that I use. It's called Seasonal Cooking. Let me actually find it. Yeah, seasonalfoodguide.org. So you can use this and actually put in your where you live, and based on the season, it'll actually tell you what's in season. Another way to very easily understand what is in season is if you're shopping at a grocery store, often there is a local section. So that area will have things that are coming from local farms. And then the other way to know what's in season, a lot of times if you go directly to a farmer's market, which might happen in your town, say once a week, the people that are coming there are typically from right around where you are. And so that's another way to check what is in season.
Yeah, absolutely. I also tend to find like the produce that is cheapest is usually the ones that are in season. Not always, but
Yeah,
often. So that is helpful.
yeah. Curious if other people have any tips of how you go about finding seasonal or local foods. And feel free to come off mute if you'd like. Cool. Hamza is saying USDA has a really thorough guide for seasonal produce. And then Rita G also says looking at the local section at stores.
I will say, I don't know. Can people hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, we can.
Great. How do you know? Thanks, Sapna. I was also going to say, if you go to a farmer's market, asking your farmer what's local and seasonal is always great. They can tell you, like, this is the last week for strawberries, next week is the first week for ramps, and all that kind of stuff. And you can learn a lot about when farmers plant what and what's actually at peak season. And usually, I just moved to California, and here there's always farmers that will sell you like the cosmetically challenged and late season vegetables for a discounted price, and that's a really great way of trying like end of season fruits and veggies for a slightly cheaper value. And that can be a really helpful way to get into eating seasonally.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great tip. Thanks, Hamza. Juiki actually has an interesting, practice here where she says she eats out a few times less to save up for bring your own container stores for different things like peanut butter, nuts, grains, all in glass, which I believe it. It probably makes the kitchen look so organized and beautiful. And Amalina Vijayalakshmiji is complimenting your recipe, which she said tastes really good.
Then I think her newest comment said that she turned the muffin batter into a pancake. That is so smart. That sounds delicious.
Yeah. Yeah. Rita G had a question.
Hariom Sapna, thank you. This was really helpful. Emelina, both. This was really fun to watch, although I didn't have my own recipe and like kitchen ready. But I had a question about the CSA. When you are looking for a CSA, what kind of things should one look for in terms of what their practices are? Or do you kind of have like
Yeah,
a checklist? Yeah.
that's a good question. typically I try to focus on, that they're sourcing their labor responsibly, paying the farmers well. A lot of online kind of repositories of different farms will actually have these kinds of ratings, which make it pretty easy to find one that might fit your budget and needs, but also have these qualities of just being a really responsible farm. I'm purposefully not mentioning organic as something that I would focus on, though the CSA I am a part of is organic, and the reason being that I know that being cleared as organic can often be a really restrictive thing for farmers, and so I try to find a farm that's actually closer as kind of the main way that I can contribute. If I know it's closer, of course, they're growing things that are meant to be grown in Massachusetts and in season because it grows better here in general. And I think of mainly reducing food miles and supporting the local produce and that local ecosystem really being the central tenet of my contribution. This farm that I participate with is organic, but like I said, I've just seen, and maybe someone else on the call might have some more information about this, that organic can sometimes be a restrictive label, that often farms are practicing organic farming. It's just that getting that certification is difficult.
So yeah, go ahead.
Amelina, you had actually explored imperfect produce as well, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I never signed up perfectly, but I was looking into it. I was doing some research. So there's different companies like Imperfect Foods. I think Misfits Market is also a similar one where they are perhaps an alternative to CSAs, especially in the winter, where they find produce that is otherwise going to be discarded from grocery stores, like things that don't look perfect or are like a little, they look not normal, I guess I would say. Like there are certain standards that grocery stores have in order to sell their produce, but it's not usually standards of whether it's edible or whether it is healthy. It's just visual standards. And so Imperfect Foods and Misfit Markets takes this produce that would otherwise, like perfectly good produce that would otherwise be thrown away, and then instead compiles it and then ships it to people's homes. So I think it is a great alternative to reduce some of that food waste that is done on a national, worldwide level. I just haven't necessarily subscribed to myself yet. But if anyone else on this call has subscribed, please let us know how it has gone for you.
Yeah, and it looks like, thanks, Emelina. And it looks like Hamza, you had something to add, maybe about the previous topic.
Both topics, actually. So on organic and looking for organic stuff, and I really appreciate that you brought up the fact that organic is not like the end all be all of a quality farm. Organic certification is a really costly and timely process that a lot of beginning and otherwise under-resourced farmers do not have access to do. It takes having a local certifier come to your farm, proving many, many things in order to get someone to even refer you to USDA, for then USDA to then give you the certification, and then for you to be able to use that label. It is a time and resource intensive process that not every farmer has the ability to invest in, but there are a lot of farmers who would also do things that are not necessarily considered organic by legal and product standards, but are ecologically sound and are high quality practices for the environment around them. So great point by Sapna earlier that that's kind of the issue with organic. It's great if a farm or a business that you support can get it. It's not always easy to do so, and it's not all inclusive. So that's kind of the difference of looking for practices that align with your values. That doesn't have to be organic. On the Imperfect Foods Misfits Market piece, those companies have been providing that service. In academic literature, there's been a significant criticism of them, though, that if it really resonates with your values, it's important to consider. Both of those companies started in California, where local nonprofits were actually doing that work for free or using grant money to bring otherwise unsellable food, whether for appearance or anything else, to low-income communities and people who otherwise didn't have access to produce. Both of these companies, Imperfect Foods and Misfits Market, have capitalized on that practice and started a business, like profit money-making business off of them. And it's actually made it difficult for places where these two companies have a big market to source those kinds of foods for low income and otherwise people who otherwise might not have access to produce. So that is a consideration there. The other thing to remember is that not all not great looking food, so cosmetically challenged food, is going to go into the trash. A lot of damaged tomatoes go into making your canned tomatoes, your crushed tomatoes, tomato paste, tomato sauce. So it's important to remember that when they tell you that, oh, all the food would have been wasted, not necessarily the case. A lot of that food is going into other food products that are perfectly fine to purchase and actually really useful in a kitchen. So just, I mean, proceed with caution, I guess is what I would say. They are great. They provide a good service, but there's always a second story. So just wanted to make sure I shared that here.
Thank you so much, Hamza. That was helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, great context.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go check on my muffins and make sure they're not burning. BRB.
Yeah, I just did that. I think I might need another 2 or 3 minutes. Just looking around for anyone else that has anything to share, either questions or other things related to this idea of sustainable cooking in particular that you're exploring, you're trying out. So Juichi is asking, for those that grow their own veggies, how do you get soil that's not wrapped in plastic if you need a small amount? So recently, actually, I think Juichi, we've discussed this before, and you also had some ideas about this. Recently, in Cambridge, they actually did a distribution of compost that I guess had come from the city directly. So right around the time where people were starting community gardens, they invited people to come and you got to bring your own buckets or containers, really whatever you wanted to get soil. So I'm wondering if there are other efforts like that. I'm sure it's not the only place that's done things like that, but that's one thing that got me thinking about, okay, that's a way to get soil or compost without necessarily needing the plastic bag. Rita G sharing that a local nursery actually brought it directly to their driveway, but in a larger quantity. And so maybe another thought is that if you know there are friends in your area that are also about to start gardening or doing the whole refresh on soil for plants, maybe going in on a larger quantity together and then dividing it up might be a way to get access to that. In Boston, among the chicks, this is a totally different topic, but we've tried this with some household items like the plastic-free cleaning products, for example, like the dishwasher tablets, the toilet tablets, the sink clean or the dishwasher, and then the laundry detergent tablets. Those brands that come actually without any plastic and with very little packaging. Often there's a minimum that's required for it to be shipped, and many of us live in small apartments, so we really don't need that much. So we've also informally started doing bulk orders together and then splitting it when we see each other as a way to still get these kind of sustainable products without necessarily having to hold on to a lot of it ourselves.
Sapna, is there a brand you would recommend for that?
So I've explored Blueland so far, and that's been working well. I actually like the way that it's working with our laundry too. And then this other actually brand that's been doing really well for us is this. Since I have it right here, I'll do this. But I'm sure there are plenty like this. I've also just noticed it's so much more comfortable to do laundry with the sheets versus the big jug because it's not heavy at all. So that's been nice too. Okay, checking on my muffins. Perfect. Yes. I think mine are all set, Amelina. How about yours?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, mine look good. They look a little greener than usual, but I doubt that's a problem.
Yeah, that's just because you use the peel of the zucchini in there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy your muffins. Please let me know how they go.
Thank you for having us, Critique Team.
Thank you, Amelina. Thank you, Sapna. This was a lot of fun to see you guys working and talking and teaching us all at the same time. So just a quick reminder for everyone, as Vivekji has shared, we have our last month of the Dedicating to Devi sort of challenge, but then also wanting to kind of keep this going. And it's not a temporary, it's more of a lifestyle change and practice. So we would still encourage anyone that hasn't joined yet. I'll put that in the chat again. There's the on the website we have details about dedicating to Devi. We encourage everybody to join us. I might ask Zui if you can share that in the chat, the link to the page. There's also the information there about the charities that we're supporting as well. And then next month, our workshop will be on October 22nd, and it's going to be about switching to 100% renewable energy. So really looking forward to that one as well. Please join us. And the link to the WhatsApp group is also in the chat. Anita, thank you. And looking forward to seeing everybody. And we'll just end with an Om, and looking forward to seeing more of you on our WhatsApp. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you, everyone. Hari Om.